Okay, y'all, let's just get into it. Today, I am airing the second part of my interview with Mike Lee. Mike Lee is my brother, my partner with the website, The Fifth Quarter. And last week, we talked about, Mike's beginnings and how he got into HBCUbands. But now, we're going to focus directly on The Fifth Quarter because people have been asking, how did you and Mike meet? How did you all get together and do The Fifth? The Fifth Quarter, for those who may not be aware, is a website, a web community that Mike and I ran for 20 years. It went live in 1999 and it continued to 2019 when we closed it down after 20 exact years of being up and available to the HBCU band community. So through the years, people wanted to know how we met each other. Some people have even thought we were married, which is interesting to me because we have never been like that. It's always been a brother-sister kind of deal. But anyway, here is my interview with Mike Lee. Hopefully you will enjoy and learn a bit about where the Fifth Quarter got started. All right, Mike, so let's talk about the Fifth and how we got to know each other. And, this is kind of intimidating, I have to be honest, because it's like 20 plus years of shenanigans. And we met in, 1998?
October 1998, that's right.
Yeah. So
we met, so I think you had just graduated, right? You had just graduated?
No,
point, right?
I had graduated a little bit before. Well, you know what? That's not true. It was some months. It was in my first year of graduation.
Okay. Yeah, so I came out of school in December of 97. And one of the hardest things for someone who's marched in a HBCU marching band for those 4 years, one of the hardest things to do is to separate from that program. Because you recognize that it's never going to be the same. You're never going to have the trips. You're never going to be in the same place as your cohesive band, your section, whatever it is. That's one of the hardest things you can imagine. And I was feeling that at that point. I'd been out almost a year and I wanted to figure out a way to keep in contact with people I marched with, but also create a space that would help those who are in other marching bands stay connected. And so I bought this URL, thefifthquarter.com, THE, the number 5TH quarter.com. And I must have bought it early October or maybe late September. And I was like, here's a story of how I came up with that name. I'm not sure if I've told you this, Christy. So I've gone to homecoming and there's a guy I marched as a drum major with. His name is Tory Jones. We called him Lemonhead. He got his crowd name the same way I did. Somebody just called him Lemonhead, but he does look like the little Lemonhead guy on the Lemonhead box. So that's why they call him Lemonhead. And we still call him Lemonhead, just like they still call me Aya. But we were sitting in the stands after the game, and I don't even remember who we were playing, but we were it was in the fifth quarter. We were going back and forth. And I didn't refer to it as the fifth quarter at that point. It was just, after the game, he leaned over, he was like, this is what the fifth quarter is all about. And literally right then, bing, a light bulb went off into my head. I said, the fifth quarter. That's exactly what I'm going to call it. Because I've been thinking about it. I didn't know what I could call it or how I was going to do it. But that popped up in that light bulb, literally dinged in my head and said, that's what I'm going to call it. The fifth quarter. As soon as I got back to North Carolina, I went to GoDaddy and signed up for it. A few weeks later, I got an email from a young lady named Christy Walker. She was asking me what my plans were for the fifth quarter. Go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, so the thing that made me want to do the site was very different from yours. So in September of 98, there was a fight between Prairie View A&M and Southern University's bands. It was a fight. They fought kind of like off to the side, and it was a big deal because I
remember that.
Remember when that happened? Like it was all on
TV. It was on the news. It was like on national news.
It was all on national TV, and it didn't surprise me just because I was ingrained in the culture I mean, of course, I wouldn't want two bands to fight, but it didn't really shock me that these two bands were fighting. Well, anyway, I feel like a couple of weeks later, there was a column in the Sports Illustrated. I think it was Rick Riley who wrote one of the like op-eds, I guess, in Sports Illustrated. And he was kind of making fun of us, like, kind of calling, when I say us, I'm talking about like HBCU bands. Like he was saying, I can't believe these two bands fought, calling us basically soft, basically wussies. I mean, I haven't seen the article in literally decades, but I guess it's, we can look it up, Google or whatever. But he was basically saying that, why are y'all are the pansies anyway? Y'all are the band geeks. Y'all aren't supposed to be, fighting. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, you just don't get it. You don't get it. It did not surprise me at all that these two fans were fighting. You just don't understand culture and how HBCUs interact and how serious it is for us. And so, I had already had a website, I had been out. You and I actually graduated the same time. But, I just been, again, it's just like you separate from, you separate from your program. Things are kind of weird because it's like the time goes on and you're not in the band. And so I knew that there were people out there who thought the same way I did, who would have gotten annoyed at that Rick Riley article. Like I knew that there had to be some people out there. And so like I created a free tripod site called The Ranks. And so long and short of it, I started to build an online community with these people that were on our message boards to talk about HBCU bands. And so, it made me feel good because I wasn't the only one out there that would be annoyed at people making fun of our culture. I know I'm not the only one that understands how serious this craft is. And so I was thinking, well, let me, rest in peace tripod, but I was thinking about getting my own domain name. And I was trying to think of a way, of a link, of a URL to choose. So I was putting in different like band terms and things just didn't feel right. And then I thought about the fifth quarter. Well, I go to like GoDaddy or whatever. I type in the number 5thquarter.com. Oops, somebody has that. So I was like, okay, well, in the meantime, I'll get the FIFTHquarter.com. So I signed up for that one. And then I was thinking, I was like, I wonder who has the number 5thquarter.com. I wonder who has that. And I wonder what they want to do with it. And so I just looked up on GoDaddy and there was Mike Lee, Mike Lee's information. And then I emailed him and I was like, hey, what do you want to do with this URL? Like, what kind of plans do you have? And then you and I, Mike, we just started talking for long periods of time it was for months because the site went live in January 99. But you and I, you were working as a web designer at the time anyway, right? You were like a full-time web designer. I dabbled in it, but weren't you doing that full-time?
Yeah, I sure was. I was, I was actually a Java developer at IBM at that point, but I was doing web stuff. I was doing kind of on the website Java development. So I was like, I do this. So, we could do this. So we worked. Yeah, we spoke a lot between October 2018 and January 2019. And we came to a really good spot. We got a good site. We got, that's when we had a site more than just a forum. We kind of created places for pictures and there's just this community. Now, remember, the interesting thing here is this is before social media, right? Mm-hmm. So we were trying to accomplish the same things that social media did, but this is before anybody thought about a Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. We were just creating a place for HBCU band members to come, chat, talk trash, all of this kind of thing. And that's what we were successfully able to do because of the passion that we both had from growing up in HBCU marching bands.
Yeah. And I remember when we opened the site that day, like there are people that I still keep in contact with, and I'm sure you keep in contact with as well, that were there that first day. And, they were like, oh my gosh, this is an actual site for us. And,
Right.
shout out to Gerard Howard, who runs, he has the Black Hodge
Bandhead.org.
.com. Yeah. And he, that's the homie there, all three of us are cool with each other. He had his own stuff going on too. But I'm just, speaking on behalf of the Fifth, it was just really interesting to see it develop through the years. Right. And I just wanted a place where we could talk without being made fun of or being made to be like some kind of geeks or, I just wanted like-minded people to congregate with on the web.
Yeah, I mean, it was a place specifically for HBCU marching bands, right? So the MEAC fans had a little division in their forum for bands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was that. Like other places had just little sections for marching band conversation, or even if it was a kind of sports related. But this was really the first of its kind that is strictly dedicated to HBCU marching bands. That's it. And that's how we started getting the attention. Because again, as people rotate out of a marching band program, the one thing that they want to do is they want to continue to live that marching band culture. And so having a place dedicated to you with people who understand exactly how you're feeling coming out of a program is the best thing possible for you in that situation. So that's where I think the fifth quarter started growing, in popularity. It was to a point to where, some people didn't know that I did the fifth quarter at A&M. And they were talking about the fifth quarter. They were like, man, have you guys got to go out there and to this fifth quarter, man. It's like for us, we got to be out there. Let's go represent MMW and so forth. And then, people like, Mike, you got to join this site. And I was like, that's my site. I did that site. Get out of here. They were like, oh my God, this and that. Yeah. And even to this day, and I know we're talking about the beginnings of the fifth quarter, but even to this day, people are associating me and say, oh, wait, are you the Mike Lee from the fifth quarter? Like, yeah, that's me. They're like, oh my God, I grew up on that site. I grew up on that, right? Because it hit a certain part of who we all are as marching band students and marching band alumni, HBCU marching band alumni. It hit a very important and certain part of our lives. And so I think that's why it took off so quickly and so heavily. And we had high numbers of unique visitors, right? We had high numbers of account signups. Yeah, tons of postings. And one way you can tell the impact that you have on a culture is what happens outside of that particular event or service or site. So, for example, we created things that people still use, like free post or, to the graveyard or, ABDF or whether the Spash Party, all of the, NLBH, COSO, those things, still live on. And so what was the trash talking site? It was the trash talking part of the forum. I can't remember.
Was it Smackboard?
The Smackboard. Yeah, the Smackboard. Yeah, that's right. That's where people would talk trash, right? And I still hear that referenced periodically, in different conversations. And that came directly from us. That came directly from the fifth quarter. So it was impactful. I think, what we did was impactful to the entire craft itself, not just the individuals that participated on the website.
Well, Mike, let's talk about some fun happenings that we've had over the years. Like the first thing that pops into my head is the fifth quarter cruise.
Oh, that would be the number one thing that I was gonna say. the NLBH cruise. The
Yeah,
NLBH cruise. Who would have thought that a group would rent out a boat in Virginia and watch band tapes?
so let me just say this, like, I got to give a shout out to my boy Kevin, who marched for Norfolk State, who was an avid visitor to the forum. And he worked at the time, he worked at the Spirit of Norfolk, which is a dinner cruise. It's a midnight cruise in Norfolk, Virginia. And I was in grad school at the time at Old Dominion in Norfolk. So, I was local. And he said that he was like, people rent out like because it was like, I guess it had 3 decks. And so, like they'll rent out a deck for a certain event. And, Kev came to me, he was like, Christy, we could set up a projector and, we could have the sound coming up from all the sound system. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So long story short, one night in July, and it was in 2002 in July, Mike drove up from North Carolina, and he stayed at my apartment. I was in on-campus housing, and so he stayed with me. Yep. And like we had a midnight cruise. It ended up having 111 band heads from all different kinds of schools and everything, but it ended up being 111 people. My parents were on board. Dr. Hodge, who was director at A&T, was on board. Mr. Holden, who is a director at Virginia State, was on board. And it was just like, but the rest were like band heads, period, that we went on the midnight cruise and had fun and played band tapes pretty much. I can't believe we did that now that I think about it.
And we had a cookout. We had a cookout too, didn't we? Didn't we have a cookout?
Yep, we had a cookout. At some
point. We had a big cookout there.
Yeah, it was the day. It was that day because we went on the cruise was a midnight cruise. So earlier that day, we had a big cookout, and you and Stan and Paul, y'all were the cooks, and we played volleyball and had card games and.
Yep. And do you remember that? Do you remember that the first day, that was the first time we met in person?
No, that wasn't, Mike. Remember the first time we met in person?
It wasn't. Are you sure?
No, it was in '99 when we went to this game and we met in the airport, the Atlanta airport, with Warren and Herb. That's not true, is it?
When was the cruise?
Summer 02.
The cruise was 02?
Mm-hmm. But we had met in 99.
We met before then. We met before then,
Yeah.
It was later in the year though. It was down in the year. Yeah. People still talk about the cruise.
Yeah.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Met in the airport for the first time. We gave each other the biggest hug, and like, we it's not like we had FaceTime or anything. Like, I mean, we knew what each other looked like, but it's not the same as being in each other's space, I guess you could say. Yeah.
That's right. And so, the fifth quarter afforded us some really interesting opportunities, right? Think about the Honda Battle of the Bands, right? They sought us out to do their website and voting.
Yeah, so that's a little known Black history fact right there. So people who listen to this and know about the Honda and everything, like the very first year that the Honda was in place, those folks contacted you, right? Because they had been looking at the fifth quarter and they were like, we need somebody to conduct our voting, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but also remember, we were part of the site selection committee. We helped make the decision to have it in Atlanta. Houston and Dallas were in contention as well. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. I remember being in those conversations.
Yeah, people don't know that, but it's just us, little old us, and I think about like Drumline when we got flued out. We got flown to New York to interview.
To New York.
That was my very first time in New York City to interview the cast.
Oh, really? Yeah, I'd been a couple times. We were in there with the big entertainment industry reporters asking the questions.
I was so nervous that day. I was so nervous. Mike was just sitting beside me because we were all sitting at I'll never forget, we were in a hotel and, we were sitting at those round tables that seat, those banquet tables that seat like 8 people. And so it was like Mike and me, some other press people, and then like the stars. So it would be like either Nick Cannon or Zoe Saldana or Orlando Jones or Charles Stone, who was the director. And I remember just sitting there being like, I was so nervous, Mike. I'm glad you were there because I don't think I would have been able to handle it by myself.
That was a great trip. It really made us feel like we were really making a difference in HBCU marching band world because the stars used the 5th quarter to do some of their character research.
Yeah, and they basically told us. And I wanted to ask you, Mike, do you still have the pictures from that event? Yeah,
I sure do. I'm sure I have to find them. But we took a lot of pictures. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you're gonna have to send me those pictures for real. Can you make that a holiday break job for you to do? Because I was like, I've been wondering about those pictures.
I have to wait till we get back home because the hard drives and stuff are at home.
Right.
But I'll definitely try to make that happen before the end of January. Definitely.
Okay. So remember when we had our 5th birthday get together? It was during Honda weekend and it was at the Marquee, and we had over 100 people to come to that one too. We had
that's right.
We had like the projector set up. We were watching tapes, and it's so interesting because nobody would do that nowadays. Like nobody, with YouTube and everything, nobody would like watch tapes anymore. They just look up clips and whatnot. But I mean, we had a projector going on. We had like 100 people. We ordered a cake. Mr. Adams, who was assistant director in Norfolk State, he said a word for us. Like it was good times.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, at that point, we had solidified our presence in the marching band culture. And I think that's when we changed. Is that when we changed our slogan to protecting
our history, preserving
the craft? Yeah. Because we had no longer just been a place to meet. We're now part of a culture and it's survival. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And so that was an important time too. But did we have a wedding at one of our events?
Yeah, there was a wedding. Yeah, it was. I think it was just a get together we had. It was. You know what? It was after Honda, and I mean there's several 5th quarter babies walking around on this earth because their parents then met on the site.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So let me just say this, people will say, oh, you're Mike from the 5th quarter. I had an interesting thing happen to me just a couple of years ago. Like, this was when the 5th quarter was about to close because we ended up closing in January 2019 after doing, 20 years. And I was at Dallas airport for my job. And I went to this conference and I actually had a student with me who I was kind of like chaperoning, like escorting, I guess you could say. Anyway, the student and I were in the Dallas airport and there are 2 gift shops. There are 2 different gift shops, one to the left, one to the right. So we're going back to North Carolina and we are like, okay, let's get something to drink, get some snacks or whatever. So I'm like, hey, well, let's go to this gift shop and it's the one on the left. So we go in there and we do our shopping and whatever. And the guy that's behind the counter, he said to me, now this is my first time in Dallas, right? First time. He says to me, I know you. And I was like, you do? And he was like, yeah, I know you. You're Christy Walker. You do the 5th quarter. I was like, how do you know me? So this just blew my mind because I was like, how do you know me? And it come to find out, it ended up being this guy, Kevin, who was very regular on the site. I think he went to Texas A&M Commerce, but he's always been like he's a percussion guy, big time band head or whatever. And I had never met the guy in my life. And he just saw me and was like, I know you. And just blew me away. And this was like 2 years ago. And he works there. And so I was just speechless after that, and the student was speechless too because she was like, "What in the world?" But you've had encounters like that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely, especially around Durham. Since I'm on a school board now, and I do attribute my time in HBC marching bands to being successful in public office and leadership. But there's people like some of the band directors, just some of the people from Central or who graduated from Central who are doing different things like in jobs and so forth. They'll see and say, "You're Mike Lee, right?" And I'll say, "Yeah," because see, I think they may recognize me from being on the school board, but they recognize me from the fifth quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And before people recognize me from the fifth quarter, before they recognize me as being an elected official.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, and Mike and I, we live in the same city now. It wasn't always like that, but I mean, we've lived in the same city.
Yes.
I moved down here
Oh man.
in 2007. So it's been a good little bit, but I mean, who would have ever
Has
thought
it been that long, Christy?
Yeah,
Wow.
2007. Yeah. But who would have thought that, after all of the twists and turns that our lives have made, we would have ended up in the same city.
Yeah.
And, still band heads.
Yeah.
I know that, and I just want to say that, you, over the years, you've been a great partner, and you are very much kind of on the back end. Like, I was more seen as like the front end, the face, more interacting with the people, but people always knew who you were, and you were kind of on the back end. But I just want to just publicly say that, I appreciate your friendship and our partnership through the years, and I really do think of you like a brother. Sometimes we have little fallings out, and that's how family does.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
when it comes down to it, I always feel like you have my back.
Absolutely. And I would say the same too, Christy. I was always very happy to let you, stand out front and, represent the fifth quarter, because your passion for marching bands is insurmountable, right? I don't know that there's anybody I know or have seen that has that level of love for, the craft of HBCU marching bands. And so when I started to step back, and just kind of help behind the scenes, and then eventually kind of rolled off a little bit, it was important for me to continue to see you thrive and do well, because we've known each other for 22 years, right? And I don't know that I've anyone that I know and have this type of relationship, like we continuously talk, we continuously kind of chat here for 22 years. I don't know that, right? And that's almost half of my lifetime, right? And so we were very different when we first met. And we've seen each other through a lot of different things.
Yes.
Right. And there's not a lot of people in our lives right now that can actually say that, and at least not in mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so this relationship is extremely important. And this is because of the fifth quarter. This is because of HBCU marching bands. This is where HBCU marching bands, the fifth quarter, is where you meet lifetime friends. And this is just proof of that. I think it's more HBCU marching band in the fifth quarter, but this is proof of that. And so, yeah, you are absolutely like a sister to me. I mean, like my wife, she refers to you almost like you're my sister, and say, "Hey, you got to check on Christy. Christy posted this, go call her and ask her about it," or something like that. Because you're just part of the family. You're just kind of part of the family here. And I think that's always going to be the case, even without the fifth quarter, just because of what we've built. And you'll always be that person for HBCU marching bands. You're always going to be, in my mind, and I think in most people's mind, the leader of how HBCUs became what they are today. That you are a deep, rich piece of the culture of marching bands. I believe that you've touched far more lives than you can actually comprehend, in that we had high schoolers on the fifth quarter that went to HBCU marching bands because of the fifth quarter, and they're going to have kids that go to HBCUs and march in the band for the fifth quarter. They may not associate it directly to Christy Walker, but if you take a look back at all the generations that will benefit from the growth and the maturity of HBCU marching bands because of the fifth quarter, that can all be attributed back to you, I believe. So I think you're a really big part of it, and you should get a little spot in the Smithsonian, in the marching band section, because just your contributions, to HBCU marching bands are matched by no others.
Well, Mike, I have no words for that. Thank you. I mean, it's weird to listen to praise like that, but it means a lot coming from you. And I'm so glad that you and I got a chance to kind of reflect on this. Because I think that you and I could really talk another hour just from the situation.
I think so.
And just
absolutely
the people we've met. And all right, so I guess we will go ahead and end this. But it's always a pleasure talking to you, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Same here, Christy. I really appreciate it.
You have listened to the HBCU Band Experience with Christy Walker. Interviews and editing conducted by yours truly, Dr. Christy Walker. The music is District 4 by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find this podcast on HBCUbandexperience.podbean.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Take care.